for being on the show today.
Thank you, Wallace. Goodbye.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, it's a modern-day lynching, according to Bishop Brian Tamaki, who's hitting back at criticism of his pre-lockdown exit from the super city. A government minister puts Ports of Auckland on notice over its poor safety record. Maersk's plans to shift empty containers south. Bus drivers want to know when they're getting the COVID jab. So why can't the government say Pene Henare is live? Long waits to get driving tests are putting the brakes on people getting jobs. The chicken's a hit, the brownie not so much. We found out what's on the menu as more schools join the free lunches program. And the 12-year-old booking in COVID vaccine appointments for the elderly.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with tēnei. The Director General of Health says the Auckland lockdown is still justified, despite another day of no positive community cases. Cabinet will decide tomorrow if the 7 days that began on Sunday is long enough to be satisfied there's no widespread transmission of COVID-19 in the community. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Today marks the fourth day with no new community cases, but Ashley Bloomfield says alert level restrictions are still necessary. He says it's still less than a week ago when one of the recent positive cases could have exposed other people at an Auckland gym, and officials are looking for results of that testing before they consider a level change. Dr Bloomfield says while the negative tests coming back are encouraging, they're looking closely at the results from the wider testing both in Auckland and elsewhere. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
Ports of Auckland is being warned it must accept all findings and recommendations of a review into health and safety. The Auckland Council initiated a review into safety at the port following the death of 2 workers. The report is with the Council's Chief Executive and CEO of the port for them to fact-check. Workplace Relations and Safety Minister Michael Wood says he will keep a close eye on the port's response.
And in my view, if there is anything less than a complete acceptance and a complete willingness to change practice to look after the well-being and health and safety of workers there, that will be intolerable.
You can hear the full interview with Michael Wood on Checkpoint shortly. The strongest evidence yet that Pharmac's brand switch of epilepsy drugs may have been a factor in fatal seizures was heard today at an inquest into 6 patients who died after changing brands. Cynthia Sharp, a paediatric neurologist with Auckland DHB, said she had serious concerns the brand switch was a factor in the deaths after seeing test results showing how patients absorbed different amounts of the drug after changing brands. She said New Zealand should have greater safety systems for switching patients to generic drugs. Pharmac says that Logum, the generic form of the drug lamotrigine patients were switched to, is safe. The COVID-19 response minister says New Zealanders trying to leave Myanmar would be able to get emergency places in managed isolation. Violence has been escalating in towns and cities across Myanmar following last month's military coup. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs says 79 New Zealanders are registered as being in the country on the Safe Travel website, and assistance is being provided to 3 of them. Chris Hipkins says the biggest challenge for people in Myanmar will be finding flights out, but if they can, they'll be able to get into managed isolation.
We've got a contingency set aside for emergency allocations, so where it's a genuine emergency where people cannot stay where they are, and that can be for a variety of reasons, where they cannot stay where they are or where they must return home within a given period of time for a genuine emergency, we will make sure we accommodate them.
Chris Hipkins, the COVID-19 response minister. The Australian Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, has dismissed calls for an inquiry into an historical rape allegation against the Attorney-General. Christian Porter denies the allegation. He says he will not stand down but will take a period of leave. An anonymous letter was sent to the Prime Minister accusing Mr Porter of raping a woman in Sydney in 1988. The woman contacted police in 2019 but took her life last year. A man convicted of criminal nuisance for invading the racetrack at Trentham has been banned from going to the races for life. Justin Bergman, who's 24, has been sentenced to 100 hours community service, a year's supervision, and ordered to pay nearly $9,000 reparation for his actions on January the 30th. Wellington Racing Club Chief Executive Paul Humphreys says Bergman is lucky there weren't more serious consequences.
He's been banned from all racecourses in New Zealand, and he's going to be trespassed from certainly our two venues, being Trenton and Arapuni, and we're encouraging all other racing venues across the country to do the same. So this is going to have ramifications for him going forward over many years.
Paul Humphreys says Justin Bergman's conviction sends a clear message that such idiotic behaviour will not be tolerated. It's 5:04. The Indian cricketers are on the verge of a place in the final of the World Test Championship against New Zealand. India lead their series against England 2-1, with the final test starting tonight in Ahmedabad. A win or draw is enough for India to claim the final spot ahead of Australia. India vice-captain Ajinkya Rahane says getting to Lord's to play in the inaugural Test Championship would mean a lot.
Winning the Test Championship final is equal to the World Cup, and we are all focusing on that. But having said that, focus is to play this game, 4th Test match, and then think about it.
The match has just got underway, with England having won the toss and batting first. Meanwhile, the West Indies batsman Kieron Pollard has become just the third player to hit 6 sixes in an over in international cricket, helping the Windies to a 4-wicket win over Sri Lanka in the opening T20 international in Antigua. It was a mixed day for Sri Lankan spinner Akila Dhananjaya, who took a hat-trick in the over before Pollard's onslaught. Manchester United suffered another blow to their fading Premier League football title hopes after a goalless draw at Crystal Palace. Bottom-placed Sheffield United beat Aston Villa 1-0 and Leicester drew 1-1 with Burnley. That's the news.
Vaccines are our path out of the pandemic.
If the government has a plan, people deserve to know it. And if the government doesn't have a plan, we deserve to know that too.
So what's the game plan?
We're still working through a number of factors, which includes, how many vaccines will we have available and when will we have them available.
It's the word on everyone's lips.
Vaccine, 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 vaccine.
A dose of reality. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours easing later tonight. Fine with isolated showers tomorrow. Manawatu and Wairarapa remaining showers clearing today, otherwise fine. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine and cloudy periods, a few showers about the ranges of Kapiti and Western Nelson. For Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers, rain spreading northwards tomorrow, heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, Otago and Southland mostly fine tonight. However, cloudy periods and a few showers near the east coast, some heavy with possible thunderstorms tonight. Scattered rain spreading northwards tomorrow. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow morning. RNZ National at 5:07.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's a modern-day lynching. Those are the words of Destiny Church leader Bishop Brian Tamaki following heavy criticism of his escape from Auckland hours before the city went into COVID Alert Level 3. Mr Tamaki, his wife Hannah and other helpers from the church drove to Hamilton late on Saturday night after the Prime Minister announced the lockdown was coming and also asked people to adopt the standards and rules of the increased alert levels straight away. In Rotorua, the Tamakis held a church service. From there, some of the group headed to Blenheim, on to Christchurch and then to Te Anau, and the church is also promising a service further down the island on Sunday. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins has labelled the roadie as completely irresponsible. Well, joining me now is Bishop Brian Tamaki. Kia ora, Brian. So the minister says completely irresponsible. Is he right?
He's wrong. Well, I've done nothing irresponsible and I haven't flouted the rules. And I'm not an escapee. What am I escaping from, Lisa? I didn't flee either. I was within my rights and I never broke any rules at all. And we've kept everything that is required by the the health department. So contrary to what the media is saying, the gatherings have been well within the rules. So...
all right, let's back up, Brian. So let's back up. When the Prime Minister... Saturday night, the Prime Minister announces sometime after 9 o'clock on Saturday that we're going into the alert level. At that same point, she asks people to please adopt those rules immediately, even though the lockdown isn't officially starting until 6 a.m. So at that point, when you hear that message, what makes you think you should leave Auckland?
I'm entitled to. I didn't break any rules. Those are not the law. That's not the law. In fact, we did that before midnight, so I'm well within my rights. So I never broke any rules. So what's the deal?
You're a man.
I'm in the people-changing business, and I move around the country often with a movement across Australasia. So why was I singled out? And I never broke the rules. And you and others on the media vilified and demonised Hannah and I publicly for something that we did not do.
Hannah referred to your leaving Auckland as an escape. Why would she do that if she wasn't thinking that there was something not quite right about it?
You have to ask her, because I think I don't escape from nothing. That wasn't an escape. We were quite entitled, like 9,000 plus other vehicles leaving before midnight. That was all right. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think actually for me to carry on my people-changing business, which I'm into, was very important for me to be able to carry on that.
Couldn't you do that online, Brian? You do sermons online, you do outreach online. Why couldn't you carry on doing that and play by the rules as well?
Because I had previous bookings around the country, and I can still carry those out. Excuse me. I can still carry those out quite fine. So what was wrong with that? I didn't break any rules.
You're a man of faith, right? Really strong faith, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
What about good faith, Brian? What about good faith when the Prime Minister asked you, please start following these rules now? What about showing her some good faith and your neighbours some good faith?
Well, I did. We have done that. We've kept all the rules and we've been responsible about that. I think they should lead by example, because Chris Hipkins and the Labour government haven't led by example, because they've broken their own rules as well. So it's a bit hypocritical of her and Mr. Hipkins to stand up there and say I was irresponsible publicly using me as a scapegoat when he could ship 600 students down to Dunedin from Auckland, and they themselves are not keeping the rules.
How many people were at your service in Rotorua?
There was less than what was required for a level 2 lockdown. So
but your level 3 status, Brian, so you mixed levels.
There was less than 20 spaced in Rotorua. So you were wrong.
There were less than 20, did you say, at the gathering?
There was less than 20, 25 people at the most at that gathering. And I want to tell you that...
But that's level 2, Brian. Hang on, let's just clear this up. That's level 2, right? If you leave Auckland, you're supposed to take your level with you. So you're level 3, which means stick in your bubble. How many people in your home bubble? You, Hannah, who else?
That was in Rotorua. That was the requirement. I've not broken the rules. That's responsible. We kept that. Now, Lisa...
You left from Auckland, though, Brian.
Well, you guys were wrong, because you said there was a large gathering, and so did most of the media. And that was a lie. So you're responsible for that, and you're misleading people.
I've said no such thing, Brian. I've asked you how many people were there. So this is you and me having a conversation, not with everyone else that you might have a beef with.
No,
so
it's not a beef,
you had 25 odd people there, you say? 25 people?
I'm entitled to have how many people that was there. That was the restrictions that were required out there at level 2 in Rotorua. So,
but you were coming from a city. You were coming from a city that was going into level 3, and the Prime Minister asked you and everybody else in Auckland to adopt those level 3 rules straight away. So, what? Just ignore the Prime Minister?
No, it didn't. That wasn't my crowd. That was the Rotorua crowd. So you need to talk to them. So they kept.
No, I'm asking you about you leaving Auckland, Brian. You leaving Auckland. You left prior to 6 a.m. I do understand that. But at the time the Prime Minister made the announcement that lockdown would commence at 6 a.m, she also had another request. And she asked people in Auckland to immediately adopt the rules and restrictions of level 3. So you ignored that part of her request.
No, I didn't. I kept that because
you left town.
That was exactly, and I'm entitled to that. So I left before midnight. Those rules applied after 6 a.m, thank you.
But you are ignoring her other request.
No, I didn't. You're wrong. That was 6 a.m. that applied. So, Lisa, you need to get your facts right.
No, I do have them right. The lockdown happened at 6 a.m. and the Prime Minister also made a request for people to adopt the rules of that level immediately, which you did not.
I went before midnight.
So in terms of that, how many people did you take down with you, Brian?
So I'm legally right.
How many people did you take with you, Brian, from Auckland?
That's none of your business.
So
how many people have you got in your home?
If you've done nothing wrong, why not just tell us how many people came with you from Auckland for this service?
It's none of your business. I don't need to tell you that. You need to be saying and explaining to the public why you guys vilified us on national radio and television about something that was totally false. We did not have a large gathering. We did not break the rules. We were legal. You singled me and Hannah out. Hold on.
Do you not accept?
Vehicles. So can you explain why the hatred that came from the media on one couple when over 9,000 vehicles left that city and you have not said one thing about anybody else?
Brian, you have posted via the church or your wife. You've posted on social media. You've posted on social media, Brian.
I'm a taxpayer of your radio station, and you know what? You took liberties with our money to use that broadcasting company to vilify and demonise Hannah and I about something that we were legitimately legal about. You explain
Brian,
that.
why not use your status and your following to encourage people to stick to the COVID rules? Why not use your status and your following to say to people, OK, let's get behind this. These are the rules. Let's follow the rules. For example, when the Prime Minister asked that people immediately adopt the protocols of level 3, when she made that announcement on Saturday night, why not get out there and say, come on, let's do this. I'm going to stay at home and garden for 7 days because that's what's best for the greater good.
If you just hold on a moment, people want to hear what I've got to say. You talk all the time. I have explained to you what we did. We were totally within our rights. So now you are not answering the question of why.
What about your ethical obligations and moral obligations, Brian? Because I know church and Christianity is big on that, ethical and moral obligations. So what about those, as opposed to the letter of the law?
And absolutely, we kept that. We kept both.
How can you say that you kept the ethical requirements when I refer back to the Prime Minister's announcement who asked everybody to adopt level 3 immediately?
Well, I want you to answer why you have used our broadcasting of the taxpayer of New Zealand to vilify and demonise us of something that we were totally legitimate and legal about.
I'm just having a conversation with you, Brian, asking a few questions and hoping to get some answers.
Well, I gave you the answers. I was within my rights, so there's no more about it. Aucklanders are a bit tired about being locked down, jeopardising our businesses.
Is that why you left?
Well, no, we've got a government...
Was it jeopardising business, Brian?
Exactly, the economy. And you know what? It's coming
your business specifically, though, Brian? Was it jeopardising your business too?
You know what it does for the whole country and Auckland.
Yeah, so how was it jeopardising your business? Can you just talk us through this? I'm interested to hear how it's affecting your business.
You know what, it affects everybody that we're locked down every time, an escapee, that's the right word there, comes out of quarantine to affect the Auckland, our largest economy. 2/3 of the population in Auckland is crazy, locking us down every time. The borders that are open to foreigners coming in, you bring them into the largest city, and you are jeopardising all of our businesses together. And I'm all for the economy of this country, and it's crazy that our Prime Minister and this Labour government continually allows the border and escapees from quarantine to threaten our whole economy and closing Auckland down when you feel like it every 2 or 3 weeks.
Aucklanders are being asked to stay at home, and we're clearly asked to stay at home. Brian, if you could just answer this question, it would be really helpful. Aucklanders were told to stay at home, Brian. They were told to stay put. So what makes you so special that that does not apply to you?
I didn't make anything so special. All I did was stay with the rules and legally. I had a right. So don't take that freedom away from us. I was able to travel, as Dr. Bloomfield said, that it was okay. He gets around in the country as long as he's been responsible, and I've answered your question 3 times.
Okay, let's move on to something else then. I noticed the church, during the broadcast clips that were posted from Rotorua, that you're asking people to bring cash to donate at the service in addition to their automatic payments. I'm just wondering, given you've mentioned the really tough economic times that people are facing, lost jobs, reduced incomes, is it appropriate to, have that level of pressure to bring cash as well as the automatic payment?
It's appropriate because every church has been doing it for thousands of years, Lisa. Every church has donations and people giving. And that's quite frankly...
in these times, though, Brian, with people losing jobs and the pressure of COVID, isn't that just a little bit more pressure on top of them, asking for them to bring cash as well as keep going with the automatic payments?
Well, the accusations that you and everybody else says about the disadvantage and the poor and robbing, why don't you listen to some of the people in our congregation who are saying they are doing very well, and they are not the people that you're saying that they are, unintelligent and unthinking. They freely are allowed the choice to give to whoever they want, and if they want to give like that, what business of that is to you or anybody else?
Destiny Auckland got about 90,000 in the wage subsidy, right, from the government. So if Destiny is taking assistance from the government, is there not an obligation to play by the rules, both legal and ethical and moral rules?
Well, that's an interesting thing you bring up now from way back there, because I understand that we've paid back some of the stuff we didn't need to have.
How much have you paid back, Brian? Do you know?
And we are entitled, well, by the way, Lisa, we are entitled to that subsidy as well, because those people are taxpayers.
So how much have you paid back? You say you've paid back some of it. Do you know how much you've paid back?
Well, Sam, you're interested in it. Why don't you find out? You're the one that's supposed to be doing the research.
So you don't want to say, or you don't know?
No, I don't.
Okay.
That's okay.
Where's your next service going to be? You're heading south? What's next on the list of stops?
My next service will probably be in Invercargill.
On Sunday or before?
Absolutely, on Sunday.
Do you think you'll be welcome there?
Well, why not? Only because the media has spread the defamation that they have, which is, I can't understand why you would do that.
And so, Brian, we're almost out of time, but just one last question. Are you driving down in the Tesla that Hannah mentioned that you got via a blessing?
Well, I'll be treating the climate well, wouldn't I?
So you are taking the Tesla down south?
No, I'm not. I haven't got it here.
And where did that come from? What blessing? Who donated that?
Well, somebody who obviously wanted to give us the Tesla, handed the keys over and said, would you like this? We want to give it to you as a gift. Well, I wasn't going to turn it down, would you?
Appreciate you joining us this evening. That is Bishop Brian Tamaki. Do let us know your thoughts on that. You can get in touch via text 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The strongest evidence yet that Pharmac's brand switch of epilepsy drugs may have been a factor in fatal seizures was heard at an inquest today. The inquest is looking into the death of 6 patients who died after the brand of drug changed. Paediatric neurologist Cynthia Sharp said she had serious concerns the brand switch was a factor in the deaths. Investigative reporter Guyon Espiner was at the inquest at the Auckland District Court today and filed this report.
Cynthia Sharp is a paediatric neurologist working for the Auckland District Health Board. Giving evidence at the inquest today, she said Pharmac's brand switch may have been a factor in several deaths among patients who changed epilepsy medicines.
I have serious concerns regarding the therapeutic equivalence of 2 generic medicines for epilepsy, levetiracetam in 2015 and lamotrigine currently, and our inability to discount lamotrigine brand switch as the cause of the 7 deaths that have occurred.
In 2019, Pharmac forced more than 10,000 people taking lamotrigine to change to a generic called Logum in a bid to save $30 million over 5 years. Dr Sharp said she was generally a supporter of the Pharmac model, but New Zealand needed stronger safety systems when switching people to generic drugs. Just because a generic drug was assessed to be the same as the originator brand on paper, that did not mean it would have the same therapeutic effect. Dr Sharp said that given the number of cost-saving brand switches Pharmac makes every year, it was inevitable that some of them would have negative consequences.
It is indisputable that if Pharmac institutes 60 generic drug switches every year, generally selecting the cheapest available drug, that some of those drugs, despite evidence of bioequivalence, will prove to be not therapeutically equivalent. We have no system to monitor therapeutic non-equivalence, and in my opinion, this cannot be discounted as a root cause of the deaths.
Dr Sharp said she initially believed only a few patients would have issues with the lamotrigine brand switch. But then she saw a study by Mylan, the drug company which makes Logum. She says that study showed significant differences in the amount of lamotrigine that patients absorbed after switching brands. Dr Sharp said about 2,400 people had now applied to Pharmac to stop taking Logum and be funded to return to their original brand.
Each application is essentially an indication that the patient has experienced breakthrough seizures or side effects or is anxious about the switch.
The inquest also heard from Andrew Gordon, the chief executive of the Pharmacy Guild, which warned Pharmac in 2018 that any cost savings from the brand switch would be wiped out by the cost of increased hospitalisations and ED admissions for those who lost seizure control.
The Guild opposed the proposed switch due to concern for the vulnerable patients affected by epilepsy and bipolar disorder, and the reports from our members of problems and negative experiences in relation to earlier brand switches affecting these patients.
Pharmac's own specialist subcommittee also warned it against changing brands of epilepsy drugs in 2009, 2010, 2012 and 2013. But in 2019, Pharmac received assurance from its neurological committee that it would be safe to make the switch. John Modised, a neurologist who was on the Pharmac subcommittee which approved the switch, told the inquest last month that he considered the brand of lamotrigine so inconsequential that he wouldn't normally even discuss with the patient which brand they were on.
I generally wouldn't do that now. If there had been volunteered or there was documented a brand preference or a problem with a particular brand, then there would be a discussion about whether it's possible for the patient to continue on the brand that they favour, but that's not something that we would have actively sought out.
Pharmac says that for most people taking it, Logum works the same way as the other brands of lamotrigine, and has stressed that if people have been prescribed Logum, they should not stop taking it. For Checkpoint, ko Guy and Espinatine.
You're on notice, a warning to Ports of Auckland from the Workplace Safety Minister, Michael Wood. An Auckland Council-led safety review into the ports is due to be released soon. It follows 3 deaths in recent years, including 2 fatal crushings at the port, one involving a straddle carrier and the other a freight container. Last night, workers told Checkpoint they were worried nothing will change and the pressure to move freight quickly could cost lives. Minister Michael Wood says he expects all recommendations of the independent report to be adopted, and anything short of that would be intolerable. I started by asking the Minister if he thought it was safe to work at Ports of Auckland.
Well, clearly what we have had in recent years are a number of fatalities and serious incidents at the Ports of Auckland. That has raised concerns serious enough that the Port's ultimate owner, Auckland Council, has called for an independent review of health and safety practice at the ports. That information should be coming through, and that will tell us the full story, I expect, and tell us what needs to change to make sure that this worksafe is safe and that we do not expect or accept further fatalities or serious injuries. There have been prosecutions which have successfully gone through the courts, which have spoken to a failure to follow through on the duties that are imposed on the Ports of Auckland as an employer. That is unacceptable, and that is why I was very pleased that Auckland Council took the leadership and took the step last year to launch an independent review. We need to see that information soon. There needs to be a total commitment to making any changes that are recommended through that process.
How has it got so bad though, Minister? Do these people at the port think they're above the rules?
Well, let's just be very clear that no one's above the rules, and no one should even begin to think that they're above rules that go to the heart of the health and safety of people when they turn up for work. I mean, the stories that come out of this situation are just tragic when you listen to the accounts of the families who have lost, people who are absolutely dear to them. What we can glean from some of the court cases that have gone through here is that there have been issues around the incentive culture where people are effectively being encouraged to do more and do it faster in what was a high-risk environment, and that was one of the key findings in the case.
So, Minister, does the port have an attitude problem when it comes to safety?
Well, clearly progress has not been made to date. That is acceptable. And I will be keeping a very close eye on the response of the port, its board and its management to the report that has been commissioned and will be coming through. And in my view, if there is anything less than a complete acceptance and a complete willingness to change practice to look after the wellbeing and health and safety of workers there, that will be intolerable.
You're putting them on notice?
Yes, I am.
So you've indicated that you want them to accept the findings of this report, right? Have you seen it yourself?
No, I haven't seen the report yet, but as soon as it's available, I will be reviewing it.
So you expect them to take on board the full findings of this report, correct?
Yes, that's right. I think when you've had a situation where you've had multiple fatalities, and when your owner, which, and let's be clear about this, is a public body as well, when a report is commissioned on that basis, when it's dealing with such serious matters, you would be expecting the entity to take full account of it. Now, one of the, I think, issues that has played into health and safety at the port here has been, of course, we do have a port that's at arm's length. It's governed by a board. It's a little bit arm's length from its ultimate owner, Auckland Council. That's all fine and well. But I think when you go to issues that are as serious as this, which involve fatalities, which involve whether a workforce can feel safe and confident to go into their workplace, then that has huge public interest around it. And I expect the port will take that seriously and will respond accordingly.
Radio New Zealand understands that the port has lawyers reviewing the findings. What do you make of that?
Well, of course, it's up to the port whether they wish to engage legal advice. It'll be up to any entity if that was the case. But if it was the case that legal resources were being used by the port to in any way frustrate the release of this independent report into health and safety, in my view, that would be unacceptable and intolerable. I don't have the full facts on that, but if that was the case, I simply don't think it can stand.
When you say that you are putting the port on notice, what do you mean exactly?
Well, as you said before, no one is above the law, and that has been what has played out here. WorkSafe, who ultimately are the regulator for health and safety in New Zealand, have taken these issues seriously. They've launched prosecutions where these events have happened, where lives have been lost. I've been working closely with Maritime New Zealand, who are leading a piece of work to deal with the issues around fatigue that seem to sit at the heart of some of these issues as well. And I've been in contact with Auckland Council as well, who are equally concerned about these issues, to offer them my full support in making sure that this workplace can be a safe environment for its workers.
Checkpoint requested a summary of notifications to WorkSafe from the ports, right? We've got a list of incidents here, including container not being secured, a automated straddle driving into a retaining wall, and a container falling on one of the workers. This is just a few of the incidents listed on this report. Not a single one was investigated by WorkSafe New Zealand. What do you think of that?
Well, that's new information to me, and that is something that I'm very happy to raise with WorkSafe to understand why that would be the case. What I would say is that WorkSafe have taken the issues at the port seriously. We've seen them undertake prosecutions where we've had fatalities on the port, and I'll be working with them to make sure that they have the appropriate oversight.
Does it concern you that they would not conduct their own investigation into a fatality at the port? There was an investigation by Maritime New Zealand, but should WorkSafe not be investigating that? Isn't it their core business?
WorkSafe and Maritime New Zealand work together to make sure that health and safety is regulated and investigated properly. You don't necessarily want to have a situation where you have two regulators overlapping and effectively doing the same thing at the same time. The key thing would be to make sure that there is oversight and investigation where required. So I'm happy to look at that information to make sure that we did have the appropriate authority conducting investigations.
And that is Minister Michael Wood. Well, a lot of you have been getting in touch about our interview with Bishop Brian Tamaki. This listener says Brian Tamaki is talking about jeopardising his business. I'm very concerned about him jeopardising my ability to stay alive. Others of you have got in touch to say, I'm a Christian, but I am sickened by Brian's comments. I hope your listeners don't think he represents the views of the wider church. Another, Mr Tamaki did not lead by example. He behaved in an immoral manner by taking the risk out of Auckland to potentially spread amongst his flock. Gary's got in touch to say Tamakis as leaders of the church must set the example to the congregation and members of the public and not have one rule for them and one rule for everyone else. And another person says it is a shame that he considers himself above the COVID rules, i.e. take the alert level with you. It would be great, incredibly interesting if all in Auckland adopted his view. Do keep your feedback coming. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, bus drivers want to know where they are in the queue for the COVID jab. We speak to the Associate Health Minister live. More schools join the free lunch program, so what's on the menu? We would love your feedback, so get in touch about anything you've heard on the program so far this evening. Text us 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time now for the headlines with Susanna.
The Director General of Health says the Auckland lockdown is still justified, despite a fourth day of no positive community cases. Cabinet will decide tomorrow if the 7 days that began on Sunday is long enough to be satisfied there's no widespread transmission. Ashley Bloomfield says it's still less than a week since one of the recent positive cases could have exposed other people at an Auckland gym, and officials are looking for results of that testing before they consider a level change. The leader of the Destiny Church says he was within his rights to leave Auckland before it went into level 3 lockdown on Sunday. Bishop Brian Tamaki is threatening legal action against journalists who covered his departure from Auckland on Saturday night, along with his wife and some church helpers. He told Checkpoint at least 9,000 other people also left Auckland early, and he hasn't broken any rules. Ports of Auckland is being warned it must accept all findings and recommendations of a health and safety review. The Auckland Council initiated the review following the death of 2 workers. The Workplace Relations and Safety Minister says he will keep a close eye on the port's response. An inquest in Auckland has been told that Pharmac's brand switch of epilepsy drugs may have been a factor in 6 people suffering fatal seizures. A paediatric neurologist, Cynthia Sharp, said New Zealand should have greater safety systems for switching patients to generic drugs. Pharmac says that Logum, the generic form of the drug lamotrigine that patients were switched to, is safe. Another 88,000 children at more than 300 schools and kura around the country joined the government's free lunch program at the start of the school year. That brings the total number of the program to 130,000. By the end of this year, the government expects close to 1,000 schools and kura will be giving 215,000 pupils lunch. The expansion of the program was announced in last year's budget. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time now for the business news with Giles Beckford, who's beaming in from our Wellington studio. Giles, dairy company Sinalay, wow, it's been knocked around by A2 Milk's problems.
It has indeed. It's collateral damage. A2 Milk, of course, is the big company that exports a lot of infant formula to China. Last week, it had a bit of a shocker of a first half result. Its earnings were down by about a third. In particular, it's been hit by a slump in sales through what they call the Daigo channels. Now, these are the unofficial backdoor third-party channels where people will buy, say, infant formula in New Zealand and then send it back to China, in particular, was a key market. They would do the same in Australia. Now, obviously, with closed borders, the tourists, the students, those sorts of people who would be buying the infant formula no longer here. So they've those sales have gone down quite markedly. Synlait is a major supplier of infant formula to A2 milk, so it too wears the consequences of a slump in those sales. It says it's got stock on hand. It doesn't know what its sales outlook is at the moment. It's uncertain and it's volatile. And from that point of view, just a month or so ago, in fact, just before Christmas, it already had lowered its earnings forecast, its profit forecast. It said sales would be down about 40%. Its profit for the year would be down by at least 50%. Now it says all bets are off. We're trying to work out what's happening. We're not going to make any forecast at all, which of course is not good news for Synlait. Clearly, they're taking a significant hit. They say they just won't be able to reach even their reduced targets from before Christmas. So what was once a very hot stock, it always seemed to rise in tandem with A2 milk. And of course, we know A2 milk was a gangbuster hot stock for the market. Synlait used to fly along in the tailwinds of that. Not anymore. It's being caught in the downdraft. We'll know in a couple of weeks a little bit more about how bad the outlook is when it reports its half-year earnings.
So let's move on to the Reserve Bank head, Adrian Orr. Would you go so far as to say he's sort of sounding a warning about households who may be overextended if they borrowed big for the roof over their head?
Oh, without a doubt. It's been a theme of his for a wee while. Of course, the Reserve Bank is concerned about the housing market, even if the government would like it to take a broader concern. But its concern about the housing market is how indebted do we get? How much risky lending are the banks engaging in? And that's what it applies the LVRs for, not to try and bring down house prices and the like, but to actually control the level of lending and in particular risky lending. So he was at an economics conference today, Adrian Orr, saying, no doubt at all, our loose money policies, the bond buying that we've done and the cheap loans that we're giving to banks, we make no apologies that they have led to a surge in house prices and they've been also a factor in a hot share market. And it's the same right around the world. Central banks that have adopted these policies have been fueling the fires for asset prices. But he's warning, and we have heard this before, he's saying it's a big issue. And if you're an overextended household, then you really have to start thinking about these things. And he says, we know why people are doing this, because with 20% deposit on a house, you can go and borrow the other 80%. So it's leveraging. You're making the most of cheap money, and that's then allowing you to go and make some, perhaps some risky financial decisions about buying houses. So yes, he's sounding another warning. Interestingly, at the same economics conference, the head of ASB, Victoria Short, she was saying they were starting to see now increasing numbers of customers who were starting to struggle to make payments, that they were falling behind in some areas, and an increasing number of their customers also have very little to come and go on. She called it the rainy day fund. She put $1,000 as just being a notional limit as to what a rainy day fund would be. She says there are increasing numbers of people who don't even have that much. Of course, when you have a pandemic hit or you have a sharp fall in prices, you lose your job. That's the sort of thing that you need to draw on. She was saying that's becoming an increasing worry for them.
And Giles, before you head off, what numbers have you got from the markets?
Not a happy day on the share market, down 135 points. That's about 1.1% on the top 50 index, 12,224. The New Zealand dollar just holding around 72.4 US cents, 93.1 Australian.
Thanks, Giles. Giles Beckford joining us there from Wellington. One of the world's biggest shipping companies is being told to use Kiwi crew to move empty containers from Auckland to the South Island. Faced with delays in the North Island, Maersk is bringing in 2 ships to shift containers to South Island ports to meet export demands. But the Maritime Union says the company should be using New Zealand resources. Kate Gregan reports.
The container shifting operation, called Sirius Star, will begin next weekend. The 2 Maersk ships will be operated by an entirely foreign crew, with a rotation across 5 New Zealand ports and 2 in Fiji. Maersk says this will reduce shipping delays to key markets and help meet the demand for the country's exporters. Teresa Blanc is the head of market at Maersk Oceania.
If we were not putting in these additional vessels, we would not be able to supply containers to meet the demand for the agricultural exports, because the containers will be stuck at Ports of Auckland or in the North Island. So from our view, we are really supporting the economy and we are enabling the supply chain by bringing in additional vessels.
The Maritime Union's Craig Harrison says he understands Maersk's decision to reposition the empty containers, but says more effort needs to be made to work with New Zealand shipping companies.
Why does a foreign company think it can just waltz in here, bring in a foreign ship, move cargo around New Zealand, and not even talk to New Zealand is a better solution?
Mr Harrison says Maersk should be using the New Zealand vessel and their crew.
We prefer that the Maersk of the world would actually use New Zealand ships. You know, we'd hope Maersk would actually talk to the New Zealand-based companies, because they're making good money out of taking our containers to the foreign markets. You know, it's only fair that they should invest money back in New Zealand, and the opportunity would be through the likes of Pacifica.
Pacifica Shipping operates the country's only New Zealand-flagged container ship. Mr Harrison says Maersk should use that vessel, which is crewed by New Zealanders, to relocate the containers. Craig Harrison says despite New Zealand operating only one container ship, there is opportunity to expand and get the job done. But Ms Blanc says they can't wait any longer.
We really need these vessels to run now, because now is when the peak season starts, so we don't have time to wait.
Annabelle Young is the Executive Director at the New Zealand Shipping Federation. She says the government has made it difficult for local ships to compete, as international vessels have been given a huge advantage.
International ships don't have to pay for emissions trading scheme credits, that's carbon credits, whereas the local ships do. So the local ships are paying about $1 million a year for emissions trading scheme credits, which the international ships don't have to do.
And she fears for what might happen in the future if international shipping companies continue to dominate the market.
What happens the day that there are no local ships and you're reliant on international ships? And I can tell you the answer will be that the price will go up. And there may even be situations where there just are routes that are not serviced.
The vast majority of New Zealand exports, 99%, are sent by sea and are worth $82 billion to the economy annually. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahine, ko Kate Gregan, TNA.
The government's being pressed for more information about how it will roll out the COVID-19 vaccine to priority groups. Almost 9,500 frontline border workers have received a vaccine so far. Their families and frontline health workers are next in line. One group of people who comes into constant contact with the public are bus drivers. They too want to be high on the list when the public rollout happens. But as Louise Tanuth reports, they feel at risk of catching the virus and want protection.
Auckland's Queen Street full of buses looking rather empty under alert level 3. But whatever the alert level, drivers are dealing with people and therefore risk being exposed to COVID-19, and they want protection.
Would you like to be in line quite soon to get it?
Yeah, I hope so.
With the COVID vaccine, do you know if you're in line to get that anytime soon?
Not that I know of.
Would you like to be?
Yeah, I would. It's mainly because we're in a lot more contact with a lot of people. Some of the guidelines that the company's given us doesn't really protect us that much. I don't have any ideas.
No indication.
I don't get any information from our company.
Would you like to be high in that queue?
Yes.
Why is that? Do you think it's the job that you do?
The job and my physical conditions also. I got some pre-existing issues, so hopefully I'll go for it, and I mingle with a lot of passengers as well.
Jared Abbott is the Transport and Logistics National Secretary for First Union he wants drivers prioritised.
I think that there is grounds to give bus drivers some priority over the general public, given that they are, in a vulnerable position, but also the actual demographic of bus drivers is particularly vulnerable. It's one of the oldest demographics in this country, and there's a lot of immune-compromised people, and then on top of that they do have the requirement to wear face masks all day, which is quite a discomfort for them.
Dilwyn J drives buses in the city and says COVID-19 puts all drivers under huge stress.
I'm in my mid-60s. That's kind of a good average of the ages, I think. Some of our drivers are very young with very young families. And some of the greatest stress I've seen about this pandemic has been amongst younger colleagues who, during the initial lockdown, when there was so much unknown, would get home, remove all their clothes and so on before they went inside, sometimes really late at night, and would shower and scrub themselves before they could even, greet their new infant.
And when people don't follow the rules, they're helpless.
A good number of people with masks don't even put them on until after they've got into the bus, in a space that's less than 1 metre, have shared whatever germs they're carrying as the bus driver. I myself feel concerned every time. Some drivers have asked their employers, and the instruction coming back is that we have no authority.
Brian drives a mobility taxi service in Palmerston North. Almost all of his customers are high risk.
Most of them in wheelchairs or have some other mobility issues. A lot of them have other conditions. I've got a couple that have got cystic fibrosis, diabetes. I've got my oldest customer is 93.
All of them are in the dark about when they'll get the vaccine.
Put the plan out so that the various groups that could be affected can have a say.
Tramways Union voiced their concerns to the Council of Trade Unions, who assured them they would get a top slot about a month ago. But Auckland President Gary Froggatt says they haven't been approached by the Ministry of Health about getting the ball rolling.
We had discussions with the Council of Trade Unions and asked them where we were based on the list, and that's the advice that we came back. It's just a matter of waiting.
Auckland GP Dr Rawiri McCreed-Jansen's providing advice to the Ministry about the rollout and told 9 to noon it's time for more detail from the government. Australia unveiled an extensive vaccine rollout plan almost 2 months ago, but New Zealand's yet to finalise or publish a plan. Dr McCreed-Jansen says that's a huge issue.
We don't have a detailed, explicit, expressed plan that people can see in that way, and I guess that's an issue for us because clarity and visibility are important in bringing the community along with us if we're going to roll out a really successful vaccination plan.
The Ministry of Health says over the next few months they'll expand the vaccine program, and by mid-year everyone will have the opportunity to get vaccinated. Auckland Transport declined to comment on the matter when approached by Checkpoint. Mō te hōtaka o te yahiyahi, ko Louise Tanu, aho.
It is 9 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After 6 tonight, the Associate Health Minister, Pene Henare, joins us live. Well, today marks a 4th straight day without any community cases of COVID-19, any new cases being found. It's a positive sign ahead of tomorrow's Cabinet meeting, where ministers will decide whether to lift or extend restrictions this weekend. More than 68,000 tests have been processed in the last week, but a number of results are still outstanding. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says all the latest numbers will inform his advice to Cabinet tomorrow.
What we will be looking for over the next 24 to 48 hours, right through up till the final decision, is continuing that our close contacts remain in isolation, and we've got that at the moment, and the first tests were negative. That's good. I'd like to see the tail of those casual plus contacts, particularly from the gym visit, which is the last of the sort of big exposure events last Friday afternoon. We'd like to see those test results coming in, and we're actively chasing those. And then, of course, just not seeing any other cases pop up from the testing across the community, because we're pretty confident now we've got a sharp perimeter around this particular outbreak. All those things will give us confidence that there hasn't been onward transmission.
And that was the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield. And joining me now is Otago University Professor Philip Hill, who specialises in international health. Hi, Professor. Why are those gym contact results so significant?
Good afternoon, Lisa. Well, I'm assuming, having not much more information than you have, that it's related to the time in the course of the illness that the case visited the gym, the amount of time at the gym, and the particular aspects of that location being an indoor environment and anything else that the public health team would have observed from their site visit.
So is a gym a riskier environment than some others because of the activity or just because it's inside?
I think it would be both. There may be some particular types of activity, the heavy breathing and so on, that come with heavy exercise, and then the indoor environment, and there may be other aspects of the environment that they've picked up.
Also, what can you tell us about potentially a longer incubation period for this particular strain of the virus? Are we looking at outside of 14 days where we should be keeping an eye on people?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the infectious period, which is the period of time the person's infectious for. The incubation period is of a lot of interest to us, which is the time until the person becomes symptomatic after exposure. And we don't know about that, but we know a bit more about the length of time that the UK variant tends to have people infectious for, which is a bit longer on average than the background virus.
So how much so? Can you give us the comparison?
Oh, I did read that just yesterday, and I've forgotten the exact numbers, but I think it's probably in the order of 2 or 3 extra days.
People at home will look at this and think, OK, 4th straight day with zeros, so why is it important that we still stay locked down in Auckland particularly until Sunday at the earliest?
Well, I can't really comment on all the input information into that decision, but I can sort of put my public health specialist hat on and give you a couple of thoughts. So first of all, I think in the background we have a knowledge already that this outbreak's been a bit tricky, and secondly, it has it's due to the more infectious variant, the UK variant. The second thing I'm thinking of is to give me an insight. I'm thinking of the proportion of close contacts that are positive, because we know pretty well if someone's infectious, what proportion of those are likely to be positive. It's somewhere about 10 or 20%. So I would expect if there's around 50 close contacts, then if a person was as infectious as the average person is with COVID-19, then about 5 of them to 10 of them would be positive at some stage over this week. And the third thing I'm thinking of is because of all the blaming and so on and the social media abuse that went on earlier in the week, I'm concerned about where the virus might be lurking. So I'd be encouraging anybody, no matter how long it's taking you to pluck up the courage, to get tested as soon as possible if you have any symptoms of COVID-19.
When would you start to feel like we're in the clear then?
Well, I think you can only say that at the moment. It's good news so far. In the clear is really a bit of a relative term because you're thinking about in the clear with respect to whether there's any remnants of the outbreak that can be handled by the capacity of the public health unit at level 1 or level 2. So I think we're looking good at the moment for a transition to level 2 or level 1. And I would be looking very carefully at the capacity of the public health unit at the moment to make sure that they could clean up anything that might come up after that without any problems.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Otago University Professor Philip Hill. Another 88,000 students at more than 300 schools in kura across the country are now receiving free lunches. Education Minister Chris Hipkins made the announcement at Tauranga's Welcome Bay School this morning. So what are the lunches like? Well, our reporter Riley Kennedy went to find out.
Since the scheme began in February last year, more than 3 million lunches have been served up to hungry children across the country. Education Minister Chris Hipkins says the expansion is an exciting next step.
We're looking forward to being able to expand the number of schools that are involved. This program will create about 2,000 jobs once it's fully implemented. Thus far, it's already created almost 1,000 jobs. So as we continue to expand it, that number will go up as well.
Mr Hipkins says schools will be chosen using the equity funding approach.
It looks at a variety of different demographics, so looks particularly at socioeconomics, but then also looks at those other potential factors that could mean a student population within a school is more disadvantaged.
Today's announcement was at Welcome Bay School. The principal, Jamie Delahaye, says they're happy to be part of the program.
We definitely see an improvement from that attention span in the afternoon, as well as that improved attendance of actually coming to school as well.
And he says there's no waste.
Any leftover lunches at the end of the day, they go home with other tamariki, so the wider whānau and the wider community then get the benefit as well. So nothing goes to waste, but all the wastage goes back of what has been eaten or hasn't, goes back to Bay Catering, and then they're auditing that to see what children are liking and not, and adapting the menu to suit.
On the menu for lunch today at Welcome Bay School was a chicken pasta salad, a piece of chocolate brownie, some grapes and a nectarine. The real question is, what do the kids think of the lunch?
Yeah, it's all good.
Chicken salad and a brownie.
What's the chicken salad like?
It's delicious.
And the brownie's nice and savoury and it's not, and it's really tasty.
Do you like a brownie?
I love the brownie. Also, the chicken salad is quite tasty and savoury and healthy, so I enjoy it a lot.
But the chicken pasta wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Do you think it's pretty good?
No.
Do you not think it's...
No.
Why not?
Nah, it's yuck. I don't like it.
What's that?
I don't like some of them.
Oh. So what are you going to do with it if you don't like it?
I'll still eat it.
And it wouldn't be a school lunch without some trading going on. You just gave the brownie away. What did you do that for?
Because I don't like brownies.
Do you like this lunch?
Yes.
What's your favourite part about it?
The chicken.
And they had a key question for the minister.
What's your favourite meal?
What's my favourite meal? I'm a big fan of pasta, so I'm quite envious of your lunches here today.
By the end of the year, the government expects close to 2,000 schools and kura will be part of the scheme, feeding over 200,000 pupils. In Tauranga for Checkpoint, Riley Kennedy.
Seriously, who trades a brownie? You hang on to that, don't you? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Text in on 2101. You're getting in touch about the Tamakis. This listener says the bishop says the state does not control the church, but the church does not control COVID. Another person says other people who left Auckland on Saturday night were not holding meetings. We'll be talking to the Associate Health Minister, Pene Henare, after 6.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The leader of Destiny Church, Bishop Brian Tamaki, is defending leaving Auckland on the eve of Level 3 lockdown. After leaving the city, Bishop Tamaki and his wife Hannah Tamaki held a church service on Sunday morning in Rotorua. Some of the group then headed to Blenheim, on to Christchurch and then Te Anau. The church also plans to hold a service further down the South Island on Sunday. Bishop Tamaki has told Checkpoint that he was allowed to leave Auckland.
We did that before midnight, so I'm well within my rights. So I never broke any rules, so what's the deal? I'm in the people-changing business, and I move around the country often with a movement across Australasia. So why was I singled out? And I never broke the rules.
Brian Tamaki says his service in Rotorua had about 25 people in attendance, which abides by the Level 2 restrictions. An inquest in Auckland has heard that Pharmac's brand switch of epilepsy drugs may have been a factor in 6 people suffering fatal seizures. Paediatric neurologist Cynthia Sharp told the inquest she is generally a supporter of the Pharmac model, but New Zealand needs stronger safety systems when switching people to generic drugs.
It is indisputable that if Pharmac institutes 60 generic drug switches every year, generally selecting the cheapest available drug, that some of those drugs, despite evidence of bioequivalence, will prove to be not therapeutically equivalent. We have no system to monitor therapeutic non-equivalence, and in my opinion, this cannot be discounted as a root cause of the deaths.
Pharmac says that Logum, the generic form of lamotrigine patients were switched to, is safe and people who have been prescribed Logum should not stop taking it. A maritime union says an international operation by the shipping giant Maersk to shift backlogged containers around Aotearoa next week should be using local crews. The Danish company says it will bring in 2 ships crewed by foreigners to shift containers from Auckland to South Island ports. But the Maritime Union says the move during peak export season isn't in the country's best interests. The Assistant Secretary, Craig Harrison, says Maersk should instead use a New Zealand-flagged ship which employs a New Zealand crew.
Why does a foreign company think it can just waltz in here, bring in a foreign ship, move cargo around New Zealand, and not even talk to New Zealand as a better solution?
Craig Harrison from the Maritime Union of New Zealand. Australia's Deputy Prime Minister has labelled a proposed independent inquiry into the Attorney-General Christian Porter as a witch hunt. Mr Porter strongly denies an allegation he raped a woman in Sydney in 1988. The woman took her own life last year, and New South Wales police have closed the case due to a lack of evidence. Labour and the Greens is calling for an inquiry, but Michael McCormack says there's no need for one.
Well, it'll be a witch hunt. I mean, what sort of inquiry are you going to have and who's going to head that inquiry? We follow the rule of law in Australia. If you are cleared then by the police, if they've done their due diligence, which I've got every confidence in them that they do, always, then that should be enough.
Australia Deputy Prime Minister Michael McCormack. The US Capitol Police say they have intelligence showing there is a possible plot by a militia group, the 3 Percenters, to breach the Capitol building tomorrow. Extra security measures are being put in place to try to avoid a repeat of the violent scenes of January 6th, when Trump supporters stormed the buildings. The 4th of March is the date on which some right-wing conspiracy theorists have claimed that Donald Trump, who was defeated in the presidential election, would be sworn in for a second term in office. Wellington City Council has agreed to remove a $75 million loan to the airport. The loan, which would be paid out in 3 instalments between 2028 and 2030, was described as funding a new seawall. But there was concern raised by some councillors and members of the community that the loan would actually help fund a runway extension. Councillor Tamitha Paul, who tabled the amendment, says there was a lack of transparency from the airport over what the money would go towards.
It's a significant amount of money to expect ratepayers to dish out. In the case that it is a seawall, I still have a fundamental problem with the fact that we're using public money to protect an activity that just continues to contribute to the problem in the first place, which is sea level rise.
The airport says it is mystified by the decision. The government is taking action to acquire a building which is standing in the way of Christchurch's new sports stadium. Groundworks are already underway at the stadium site, which takes in a large block of land in the central city. But there is one building remaining on the site, the NG building, which houses NG Design. Previous attempts to buy the building have failed. Land Information New Zealand says a notice of intention to take the land has been issued and is the first step in the compulsory acquisition set out in the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act. It's 6:05. The Australian men's cricket captain Aaron Finch believes the Black Caps seriously missed Mitchell Santner in last night's T20 International in Wellington. The tourists kept the series alive with a 64-run victory. Finch says Santner, who missed the game because of a cold, would have played a similar role to Australian spinner Ashton Agar, who picked up 6 wickets on a slow, low wicket.
He's a great T20 player. He's a brilliant international cricketer. So he's someone who helps structure up their side really well with pretty much 4 guaranteed overs and then some power at number 7. So he's a really important player for New Zealand.
Game 4 is back in Wellington tomorrow. Meanwhile, Sri Lankan spinner Akila Dhananjaya went from hero to zero in the space of 2 overs, claiming a hat-trick before being smashed for 6 sixes in 1 over by West Indies batsman Kieron Pollard, as the Windies beat Sri Lanka by 4 wickets in their opening T20 in Antigua. Porsche and its parent company Volkswagen say they'd consider entering Formula One if the next engine regulations due to be introduced in 2025 promote sustainable fuels. If Volkswagen did commit to F1, it's likely to race under its Porsche or Audi brand. Next week's National Surf Lifesaving Champs at Ohope Beach near Whakatane have been cancelled due to COVID-19. And the New Zealand NBA basketball player Steve Adams went scoreless for the first time this season as his New Orleans Pelicans lost 128 to 124 to the Chicago Bulls. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, this week's overseas correspondent Rima Bass is on the line from Sudan, a little too close to the recent unrest in Ethiopia. Alison Balance meets a specialist in climates past, like the one that spawned large glaciers in the North Island. And Jeff Wilmot looks for real-life equivalents to the still suit from Frank Herbert's Dune, which recycles sweat and other bodily fluids. Might come in handy on Mars. Join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
The short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Central High Country, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Showers, possible thunderstorms and localised downpours easing later tonight. Fine with isolated showers tomorrow. For Manawatu and Wairarapa, remaining showers clearing today, otherwise fine. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine and cloudy periods, a few showers about the ranges of Kapiti and Western Nelson. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, scattered showers, rain spreading northwards tomorrow, heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Canterbury, Otago and Southland mostly fine tonight, however, cloudy periods and a few showers near the east coast, some heavy with possible thunderstorms this afternoon, this evening. Scattered rain spreading northwards tomorrow. Chatham Islands mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow morning. RNZ National, 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Cabinet will decide tomorrow whether to pull Auckland out of Level 3 lockdown and what will happen with Alert Level 2 for the rest of the country. It's been 4 straight days with 0 new community cases of COVID-19. And joining me now is the Associate Health Minister, Pene Henere. Kia ora, Minister. Are there any new cases that you know of?
No, there isn't. And, we should be all proud of our efforts to have 0 community transmission. So it's all positive signs. But you are correct. Cabinet will consider all the information tomorrow and make our decision.
OK, I see news this afternoon that one of the families who have tested positive with COVID had a lodger. What can you tell us about that and where they are?
That's news to me, Lisa. Sorry, look, I haven't seen that report, so I don't want to speculate. But I'm happy to look into that for you.
OK. So I'm just wondering why that information was proactively not provided to the public. How many other sites, for example, workplaces or private addresses have been visited by these families that have not been disclosed publicly?
Yeah, look, I can tell you that as part of the ministerial group that meets daily on these matters and receives all the updates, that's why I say this is news to me, but I'm happy to look into this for you because you are right. I suspect that information that comes to us should be recent, relevant, and be able to be shared.
So even if you can't tell us specifics, like private addresses, for example, for privacy reasons, do you believe the public at the very least should be told person X went to 4 different places that were private addresses and this is how many people they had contact with?
Look, the work that the regional health authorities do to try and do the contact tracing and to make sure that we're able to put a ring around those who go to those places is a really good job. And you are right, there are matters that we can't disclose for privacy reasons, but I'm confident that in particular in the large exposure events that have already been notified, a good job to capture those people has been done, and I suspect the same will be done for those in private dwellings.
But this is an issue of trust. If the government presents itself as the point of truth and the daily press conference as the single source of confirmed information, then should we not be provided those details even if they're anonymised?
Well, look, the fact that I haven't heard these details and am unaware of those, I don't want to speculate. But look, I agree that information is key in this entire fight against COVID-19. So, I'll look into it.
Okay, earlier in the program we heard from bus drivers. A lot of them are keen to get near the front of the queue for vaccination. They want to know when they're going to get vaccinated. So what's the answer to that question?
That's a really good question. You're well aware of the sequencing for the vaccination that the Prime Minister has spoken about. Our frontline and border workers first, their families. As we look to the rollout with the health sector and others in the second phase, look, I'm happy to take the concerns and the discussions given by the bus drivers into the discussions with regard to the vaccine sequencing, which happens on a regular basis with my Cabinet colleagues, and I'm happy to share their view in that meeting.
You've had advice, Cabinet's had advice, haven't you, on the sequencing of the rollout, yes?
Correct, we have.
So why not make a full list available of the potential sequencing, or do you think that people can't cope with that, seeing where they are in the order?
Well, because we're only early in our vaccination rollout program, we've made it clear, and the Prime Minister's been clear, this is going to be a year-long effort and the biggest vaccination program that this country has ever seen. So we want to make sure that we get it right. And we are doing what we're doing with phase one with our border workers and frontline workers. And I will say this, we are learning along the way with this. And I'm confident when the time's right, the general public and everybody will be informed of the process and the progress being made with the vaccination.
So will a full list in order be released to us once a decision is made? Is that what you're saying? Or will the public get some input on the order of that list?
Oh, look, the public we've worked closely with health professionals, with members, with advisors from the public about the way the sequencing framework is created. We're comfortable and confident with that feedback, and when the time is right, that information, when it's appropriate, will be shared with the general public.
So what does that advice tell you about whether Māori should be in the front of the queue for a COVID vaccination?
Yes, look, we've worked closely with a number of Māori health professionals and community leaders on this particular kaupapa around the rollout of the vaccines. Their advice is very much part of the discussions that we're having. We were quite clear that...
So where do they say Māori should be? Should they be at the front of the queue?
What we're saying is Māori are a priority throughout all of the phases of the vaccine rollout. There are quite a large number of Māori already being vaccinated in this first round, and in the next round, with an equity lens and Te Tiriti o Waitangi as a basis for the equity that we're seeking through the vaccine rollout. I'm confident that Māori will be catered for well in this vaccine rollout.
When can we expect that full list of order?
Oh, look, I can't give you a date when that full list will be released.
Why not? Because people are waiting. They're waiting and they've been patient. It's over a year that we've been dealing with COVID and lockdowns. So the list, Australia's already put its out.
Here's one of the challenges. We have to make sure that the sequencing works in time with the way that the vaccines arrive in this country. At the moment, I can't give you the date when all of the vaccines will arrive in this country. So that's why the sequencing is very important, and the information will be available when it's ready.
That is for when you get your injection. You can't give an injection unless the vaccine is here, but presumably the order of priority remains the same.
But the logistics are different for each of them, and that's why we must continue to plan appropriately for the vaccine rollout.
So I see today in the press conference that there are 2 students at Papatoetoe who are refusing to have tests. What's their reason or concern there?
Look, I have heard that there are a small number of students who are refusing to be tested. I guess for the most part, that's their individual right to. I can tell you, however, that our health officials are working closely with them to protect them as well as their whānau and the community with regard to the health risk of COVID.
So if the school is open on Monday, do they get to go?
I can't confirm that, and that's not my decision. But like I said, health officials
but it's
are
a health-based
individuals.
Yeah, so it's a health-based decision. So can you find out for us, Minister, what the situation will be with those 2 students if the school does open on Monday?
I'm happy to.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's the Associate Health Minister, Pene Henare. Gisborne residents say there are extraordinary waits to sit driving tests, putting the brakes on people getting jobs. But driving test operators insist more testing spaces and staff are coming to deal with the massive backlog. Our Taira Whiti reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
It's a long and frustrating wait for some in Gisborne. These people, whose words are voiced, have faced roadblocks on their journey to get a licence.
I am risking my licence and getting a fine just to get to work. When we went to book my test, the wait time was 12 weeks. We even tried whakatane, but it wasn't much better. What annoys me, though, is my cousin went to book his test a couple of weeks later, and there were earlier bookings available that were not there when I booked. It's confusing and frustrating.
I sat my licence at the end of Jan and had to resit. I went to rebook straight away, and the earliest booking I could get was the end of March. It was really disappointing because I live 2 hours from town and don't have public transport to get to work. I really needed my licence ASAP and had hoped that I would be able to rebook within 2 weeks max.
The local democracy reporting service in Gisborne says wait times are at least 5 weeks, but are often longer. Ane Pahuru Huriwai is a tumuaki, or executive director of Tairāwhiti REAP, a rural education program. It helps adults who live in rural communities get their licences. At one point, she couldn't find test slots in the region for the rest of the year.
It's completely frustrating, and it's unfair. It's a whole nother layer of inadequacy around access and equity for our rural communities who are predominantly Māori.
And the reality is people can't get jobs if they don't have their full licence.
They all are keen to work. They want to work, they want to get their licences, they want to contribute to the economy, but they can't without a full licence. So it hugely inhibits their ability to achieve their aspirations and dreams, but to work. So it inhibits them to be able to do that and to bring an income into their family.
John McInnes runs a driving school in Tairāwhiti. He trains everybody from car drivers to truck drivers and sees the problems firsthand.
The majority of the jobs that are out there now require people to have a full licence. And that's, again, across the sectors that I've spoken about. Forestry, roading, transport. We all need a full licence so we can drive our machines and drive them legally.
Wairoa, between Gisborne and Napier, has had its fair share of problems too. Many teens are driving illegally in the town because their families can't afford to get a test in a bigger centre. The town's deputy mayor, Hene Flood, says they take van loads up to Gisborne to sit tests. But finding slots for all of them in a row isn't easy.
We're taking groups of learners. We're not doing them individually because we're taking them all in a van. So trying to get back-to-back bookings at the moment is pretty damn near impossible.
She says even for people on their own, it's tough.
If you're trying to book the odd individual in, you'll be lucky, but you need to be watching that system, getting your finger ready to go every hour to be able to get an individual in if you're lucky.
Waka Kotahi says there's a backlog of about 42,000 tests nationwide due to COVID-19. The normal wait time to book and sit a test is 30 days. VTNZ insists the wait time at Gisborne is now around 45 days, not the end of the year. This is because it's adding new testing officers around the Bay of Plenty and Gisborne to cut wait times. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Tom Kitchener-Ho.
It's almost 6:20. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A man who narrowly escaped being trampled by racehorses after invading the track on Wellington Cup Day is banned for life from all racetracks around the country. Justin Bergman pleaded guilty to criminal nuisance and disrupting a public meeting over his actions on the 30th of January. Ruth Hill was at the Hutt Valley District Court today and filed this report.
Justin Bergman's moment of madness is going to have a lifetime's consequence. But it could have been so much worse. Police prosecutor Graham Burr told the court Bergman came to the races at Trentham with a group of friends and had been drinking all day. At about 4 o'clock, he somehow gained access to the birdcage, a private martial area used to parade and showcase horses.
Whilst inside, he approached the horse and jockey, yelling and screaming at them in an effort to spook the horses. His efforts briefly unsettled and annoyed some jockeys and horses, but did not achieve his intention of spooking them.
Mr. Burr says Bergman moved to a grassy area by the chute and continued making growling noises. Then, under the gaze of 12,000 horrified spectators, he hurdled 3 fences and ran onto the track, 15 metres ahead of the horses thundering towards the finish line.
At this stage of the race, 500-kilogram horses and their riders were travelling between 60 to 65 kilometres per hour, were approximately 15 metres from him. Several jockeys were forced to take evasive action, including slowing their mounts and swerving left and right, narrowly missing each other to avoid the defendant.
Once the horses passed, Bergman turned to the crowd and lifted his arms in a victorious manner. Police were promptly at the scene.
The defendant stated that he had been thinking about running onto the race course throughout the day. Explanation: he told police that he was an animal rights protester and he was protesting the treatment of horses.
Judge Craig Thompson told Bergman his actions put more than one life in danger.
What you did posed very significant danger to the riders and the horses, and not least to you as well. And it can only be explained as an alcohol-fueled moment of complete madness.
The judge credited Bergman for never being before the courts before and for his early guilty plea. Bergman, who's unemployed, was sentenced to 100 hours community work, 1 year's supervision, and ordered to pay $8,880 reparation to the TAB. New Zealand thoroughbred racing lawyer James Dunn says Bergman is banned from all New Zealand racecourses for life while races are in progress.
We can't run the risk of having someone who would do something this stupid, thoughtless and dangerous anywhere near a racecourse. The tragedy here was avoided only by the very narrowest of margins, by a hefty dose of good luck and by some very quick thinking on the part of our riders.
He says the industry would have preferred a stronger sentence, but it still sends a clear message that such behaviour will not be tolerated. For Checkpoint, Ruth Hill.
Buckingham Palace is investigating reports the Duchess of Sussex bullied staff during her time at Kensington Palace. The complaint was made by a former staffer of Harry and Meghan, Jason Knorf, who went to Victoria University and is a former New Zealand Labour Party press secretary. Meghan is said to be saddened by the reports, which she sees as an attack on her character. The BBC's Nicholas Witchell has more.
What is the truth? Is Meghan, the woman who was warmly welcomed when she married Prince Harry, now the victim of a calculated smear campaign by the establishment? Or was it the case that as the Duchess of Sussex, her behaviour became unreasonable and that her staff were driven to distraction? There were strains within the Sussex household. It's a matter of record that staff members left. And now a highly revealing email has been obtained by The Times. It was written in late 2018 by Jason Knorf, the couple's communication secretary, to Simon Case. He's now the cabinet secretary, no less. In it, Knorf is reported to have written, "I am very concerned that the Duchess was able to bully 2 PAs out of the household in the past year. The treatment of X was totally unacceptable." In response, the Duchess's spokesman has said, "The Duchess is saddened by this latest attack on her character, particularly as someone who's been the target of bullying herself." Buckingham Palace has said it's very concerned about the allegations. It's setting up an inquiry. Former members of staff will be invited to participate. The palace statement concluded, "The royal household has had a dignity at work policy in place for a number of years and does not and will not tolerate bullying or harassment in the workplace." So, why have these allegations emerged just 4 days before the Sussex's interview with Oprah Winfrey is broadcast in America? Apparently, it's because former members of staff, some of whom I'm told feel very bruised, believe that an incomplete picture of the Duchess is being presented. Her supporters, of course, will continue to believe that she is the real victim.
Nicholas Witchell reporting there. Holidays to far-flung corners of the earth may be off the cards for now, but if you've always wanted to be an astronaut, here's one for you. A Japanese billionaire has bought all the seats on the first commercial SpaceX moon flight in 2023 and is offering 8 to the public. The BBC's Peter Goffin reports.
There are plenty of reasons to make friends with a billionaire, but this is a new one. An invitation to a short jaunt around the moon, courtesy of the Japanese businessman and art collector Yusaku Maezawa. He's bought all the seats on the first commercial SpaceX rocket flight, scheduled for 2023. And in an online video, he said he's looking for 8 traveling companions.
It will take 3 days to get to the moon, loop behind it, and 3 days to come back. I will pay for the entire journey. I hope that together we can make it a fun trip.
Anyone from anywhere in the world can apply. Mr. Maezawa, who made his fortune in clothing retail, first imagined a rocket crew made up of artists. but he's broadened his call to anyone doing creative work who meets 2 criteria.
First of all, whatever activity you are into, by going into space, I hope that you can push the envelope to help other people and society in some way. Secondly, you have to be willing and able to support other crew members who share similar aspirations.
There's one thing Mr. Maizawa is not looking for anymore, and that's a lunar love connection. Last year, he launched a televised search for a girlfriend to join him on the moonshot. Nearly 28,000 women applied, but he quickly cancelled the contest, saying he had mixed feelings about it. Now, he says, his motives are straightforward: to watch the Earth rise from the moon's shadow in all its extraordinary beauty, to feel humbled by the vastness of space, and to satisfy a yearning for new experiences.
And that was the BBC's Peter Goffin. Most 12-year-olds who are on their computers are usually playing video games, but one boy in New York is spending his time booking COVID-19 vaccine appointments for the elderly who struggle with technology. CNN's Eric Feldman has this story.
Sam Kirsch clicks for hours a day. He's not playing video games.
Say vaccine?
At least right now. He's saving lives.
So there I go. I just got a April 13th one.
It started when Sam watched his dad get his grandparents the slot for their COVID-19 shot. And they thought,
there's a lot of elders that can't really get appointments that well because they're not very good with technology.
So Sam reached out to his neighbor, Gita.
This is my workstation.
A fighter by nature, a Holocaust survivor, now trying to beat cancer.
I needed to get the vaccine before the end of January so I could start getting my chemo.
She couldn't get an appointment, so Sam took down her information, hit refresh until a time popped up, and Gita got her vaccine in January.
I don't even know how he does it, exactly.
She told 30 of her friends.
Because none of them knew how to go through the system with the government.
So Sam created a website. Seniors fill out a brief form, and Sam hits refresh.
One side of my screen is to do my homework, and second side of my screen is just like getting appointments.
In about a month, Sam has guided 1,000 New Yorkers to their vaccine.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing.
For a vaccine that is still being tested on kids his age, Sam is changing lives.
And now they can kind of get their life back to normal, and they get to see their grandchildren.
1,000 grateful New Yorkers.
I still get phone calls thanking me that they had a shot because Sam helped them.
And as long as there's a need, Sam will be clicking. And then there will be time for more video games.
Eric Feldman with that report. And before we go, some of your feedback on our earlier interview with Bishop Brian Tamaki. This listener says, I just don't get it. My husband's a minister and we live in Auckland. There is no way we would have considered leaving the city in the way that he did. Our staff are still in Auckland, getting in touch with people we know who are likely to have a tough time over lockdown, checking in with those who own businesses, cooking meals and doing contactless deliveries for those in our community who need food, and recording a service for Sunday. Why would you leave your people right when they need you? That one is from Sarah. Thanks, Sarah, for getting in touch. Don't forget, all our stories are online.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The leader of Destiny Church says he was well within his rights to leave Auckland before the Level 3 lockdown came into effect and wants to know why he has been singled out by the media. The government's driver testing agency is employing more staff after complaints people in the Gisborne area have been waiting up to a year to sit their test. A neurologist has told an inquest in Auckland she believes Pharmac's switch to a generic